It is September 17th, 2025. This is from my book, Uriel's Word, A Lightworker's Journey. From the foreword, this nonfiction book is dedicated to all the valiant starseeds, lightworkers, healers, shamans, spiritual warriors, mystics, peacemakers, and seers, old and young, and their intrepid helpers, who have come here in the service of humanity at this time of great change. All persons' names have been changed, with a few exceptions. This is a poem by Hafiz, from A Year with Hafiz by Daniel Ladinsky, from page 148. Enduring the absurd. Such a dignity can come to us enduring the absurd, with forbearance and humor. Elegant becomes the countenance of one who exemplifies patience. Chapter 13. Painting. When I was 3 years old, I decided to be a painter, or I aspired to be one anyways. I'd been settled on the couch with a book of Louvre paintings to look at, and a couple of those artworks made an intense wave of love and compassion sweep through me. I remember thinking, I can't think of a finer thing. I want to do that. I spent a lot of time drawing all my life. I was not some prodigy or savant, but I got to be quite good with practice. So many hours of practice. Although I never thought of it as such at the time, now I realize that drawing is a kind of concentrated meditation. I did all sorts of flat surface art. Pencil, charcoal, pastels, crayon, watercolor, batik, silkscreen, paper collage, acrylics on canvas. The acrylic paintings on canvas was something I really concentrated on from about 1985 until 2000. Most of those pieces are quite large. I liked the way bigger than a person canvases are like environment rather than an object. You kind of step into them. They have presence. And I liked the sheer physical movement painting large required. I produced well over 100 paintings in that time and have shown some of my work. Most, but not all, of my works are on DVD, which I named Gallery of Real Abstraction. This is my artist statement from that gallery, which I wrote in 1996. Working primarily as an abstract painter, I've followed my own inner vision, inspired mostly by the natural world, dreams, feelings, psychic energies, and intuitions, as well as the works of other artists. In particular, I have felt a kinship with Australian Aboriginal dot paintings, North American cave paintings, Jean Dubuffet, Pollock, contemporary color field painters, abstract expressionists, the crack-webbed surfaces of the old masters, and Javanese batik. I've most consistently focused on color as a vehicle for emotive effectiveness, and prefer large scale. Spiraling back in my methods of working, a theme of boundlessness and a web of interconnectedness predominates, as does an attunement to the element of water and its pervasive hidden energy. Often I work on a piece from all sides, not choosing which way is up until later, and sometimes there is no fixed viewing orientation. I enjoy this aspect of abstraction. It's not finite, and interpretation is flexible. Painting informs me of who I am. It's a path of self-discovery. In the process, it conveys messages from afar and from the unconscious. What moves me to paint is a desire to express intangibles, the ineffable, in a way that bypasses words, much as does music. I feel that what results ultimately doesn't lend itself to rationalistic analysis. I believe that art has a healing influence, a balancing effect, and that anything that inspires the spiritual in humanity and reverence for all of life is of immense value. Note: years after this statement was written, I realized that some of my paintings were channeled and transcend time and space, and that painting was a form of emotional therapy too. Chapter 14. A Fine Artist. 2006, summer. While staying for the weekend with a new friend on an island near Nanaimo, BC, I went for a walk from my friend's house and noticed his neighbor had a sign on his front fence, Art Studio, and a man was fixing the gateposts. So I stopped and asked him if the studio was part of the art walk that was happening, which was a yearly event there. He said he's the artist, but no, not a participant in that event. He introduced himself when I said I was staying next door and invited me to come into his studio anyways to have a look. We went in and I saw some of his paintings, which I thought were very fine. They reminded me of Seurat's work, or Alex Colville, or Bateman, figurative and with such still presence, so precise in subdued, harmonious hues. I didn't have to pretend to like them, which was wonderful. He was a professional, obviously. We had a lively, lengthy conversation about painting, and being a painter myself, there was no need to explain so much about the whole endeavor. Even though his work is so dissimilar to my own, there was a real meeting of minds and true friendliness, and of how painting is a solitary pursuit, yet both of us are sociable as well. It was wonderful to have such a conversation, like being in your element, in company. He's friends with a famous political cartoonist, now retired, who lives with his wife on this island, a walk away down the road from Ron's studio. I've told him that I was no longer painting, but writing instead, that I missed painting. He asked me what I was writing, what genre. I paused for a couple of seconds while actually considering the question before replying, true crime. Before I left, I told him I would like to offer him my CD of paintings next I saw him. He wasn't too enthused, and he explained why after he had seen the CD of my work. He loved my work. He expressed such admiration, and we talked. He was so relieved, too, that he didn't have to pretend to like my work to be kind. Such a relief! And for me, how nice to be really seen by someone on my page. He told me his initial reluctance to view my work was because of the many Sunday painters he'd met on the island, and how you don't really want to have to honestly review them, how awkward it is mostly when asked. Maxwell, who I was staying with next door to him, had shared with Ron his presentation, done at the Chile radio station recently. Maxwell and Dinah, another activist, were working to expose agendas that are targeting individuals. COINTELPRO style. That's COINTELPRO. The true crime I'd alluded to at our first meeting. Journaling about targeted individuals, or TIs, and my daily experiences as one of those unfortunate TIs. The many methods applied to such ends by perps for short. When Ron so heartfeltly appreciated my work, expressed gratitude for it for me, and then he asked, "That true crime you said you were writing? I thought you meant like cheap pot boilers. But this is happening to you?" His eyes filled with tears. I know, such harmful injustice so intentionally done, and to a very sensitive person. UK war vets had the best site up on the internet about this whole issue, but it disappeared, as no doubt many of them did too, because it's a risky venture trying to expose those who are perpetrating this crime against humanity, attempting to educate the unwary public. I will say my decades of experience have been an education about the shadow and about survival. Compassionate empathy is like gold. It shines its light that is yours reflected. It is not strained nor is mercy. It flows and emanates and lifts up. I think of Ron with gratitude and I wish him well. Ron ceased communication after he learned I was a target. I guess it was too scary. That is most people's reaction. Chapter 15, 1984. My first Saturn return, aged 28 to 29, and plus a little. The language I know now to describe what I experienced is spiritual awakening, Kundalini rising, unity consciousness, mystical experiences, psychic openings, unconditional love, Christ consciousness. For 3 weeks, 24/7, I was in a state of bliss. I had a very clear perception of zero fear of death. The only thing that I felt was missing from that state was all those that were not in bliss too. I felt this so keenly, like a divine pain, that one and only desire. How it felt was like a conviction that there is no perfect happiness till all are happy. I had a few days of breaking into laughter, realizing something so obvious that we're already enlightened here now, but we just don't notice it. At the time, what I said to a glass artist friend was, "It's all one," which seemed to upset him, and was an inkling that trying to talk about what I was experiencing, well, the people I had around me were not receptive, and were even antagonistic. So I didn't talk about all the psychic phenomenon I was experiencing then either. I had no wish to be labeled crazy or schizophrenic or worse. So I was alone with it and embarked on a search for information. I read what I could find. Carl Jung, the Gnostic Gospels, alchemy, or some. I was in the college library and a book just fell out at my feet by David Chetlahan Paladin, a Navajo artist who had been in World War II and became a shaman later. With Saturn conjunct my root, I see I'd been born with some abilities or gifts, but had no formal training, just books mostly, and some introductory practices with my aunts. Nobody said, "You're a psychic, seer, medium, channeler, never mind healer," and I didn't think of myself as such. I knew I was different, but not that different. No courses or programs for all of that was on offer at university where I was headed. I thought of myself as an artist with an interest in psychology, spirituality, biology, chemistry, and genetics. Add physics to that list later on. Mystics go straight to the experience and there is no need for proofs. Then some of the mystics, not all, pour words or images or dance, music instructions out from their fullness. How to convey what is ineffable. Some I resonate with are Yogananda and Rumi and Hafiz, and Amma, the hugging saint. Also St. Teresa the Little Flower has shown up for me, and others. Shamans. I wonder about us starseeds now. The language at first was indigos, crystals, rainbows, empaths, emotional intuitives, highly sensitive people. Now it's autism spectrum as well. More recently, 2024. I like the words Hayoka empath if I were to describe my journey on Earth, this go round. I have been like some true confessional on foot and heard the most horrific and heartrending tales from total strangers, always followed by, "I've never told anyone that." I feel honored to be so entrusted, but also like it's a burden. Wow, dump it here, me with no veil, desk, job description, or payment, and plenty of judgmentalism about the way I am. Boundaries has been a difficult lesson for me. I aspired to such utter unconditional love openness that lets all pass through without any problem. That frequency that can permit all things, as if by magic, that resonance. What a delicious, divine, all-everything state of consciousness that is. Nothing is missing. There are no exceptions. Everything and everyone is included. I wrote a poem about it called Peace Flow, where there's no need for forgiveness and nothing to forgive. And everything is alive. Many years later, when Eckhart Tolle appeared and his book, The Power of Now, so resonated, I recognized that total bliss state he described being in, but his lasted months, not weeks. I love his spirit and great sense of humor. I was disappointed and saddened, though, when in about 2012 I saw a YouTube of a Q&A he did after a talk he gave in Australia. A young woman asked him about stalking and surveillance and harassment 24/7. What then? How is meditation possible? Or peace? This is a question a targeted individual would pose, or maybe a friend of a TI. Rare as those friends are, as they get driven away, so as to isolate the TI. Eckhart brushed it off as paranoid mental illness and even made fun of it as being ridiculous, and after I got over the affront, I reasoned that since he was born in East Germany behind the Berlin Wall and had early years there, maybe he had a blind spot about that sort of thing ever happening again. Never mind on such a global scale and right under normal society's nose. Secrecy. It is the key to those programs and operations. And compartmentalization. It's now 2024, and I have a feeling that there will be a lot of unmasking of deception happening, and that's already started. Other things that happened at and beyond that first Saturn return were winning a top place in an art show at the local college and the trip to the BC interior for the 1984 BC Festival of the Arts with other artists. A treasure in my memory. I was blissed out, not on drugs, felt at home, belonging as an equal among my own kind. Artists, painters, potters, musicians, dramatists, and Paul Horn played his flute. I ate the best ever borscht and got the recipe. I fell in love with kids and dogs. I fell in love with the color pink. I got a puppy who I trained impressively. What a beautiful and smart dog she was. We were so lucky to have her with us. I found and bought a house and had a baby girl 1.5 years later. I had a one-woman show of my paintings at the college gallery. I called it Waterworks. I continued painting large canvases. I went to foreign films Sunday nights at the college, a real passion. I love to hear foreign languages spoken. It's like music to my ears. I love the diversity, so interesting and rich, like music. And as always, I cooked and made people happy with my food. March 24th, 1984, Book 1, page 113. I dreamt that there was a place on earth I had just discovered that was like a secret, almost invisible pocket. You had to be alert and aware to discover its existence. The metaphor was a town that you drove by every day, perhaps, and did not see. It was at a cross-current, a generative point, where you could see in all directions, infinitely far, all at once. The laws of nature are broken there. A magical, miraculous place. I came upon it unexpectedly. I discovered it couldn't be seen or found by straining or trying to force it into view, though it did help to look carefully at everything. Wishing too hard doesn't work either. It was a blessing, a state of grace which enabled you to enter. It was a gift. July 9th, 1984, Book 3, page 161. I awoke at 8:30 a.m., knowing that all you needed was the spiral. In my dream it was an old wise man, black-cowled, couldn't see his face. It was a rolled-up scripture or map, the end of which looked like a spiral, and the double helix, too. The old man handed me the scroll and said, "This is all you need." Note: in 2024, it resembled the Reiki symbol Daikomyo, which is the Tibetan Bodhisattva's great shining light and great heart of giving. I learned and practiced Reiki to heal an eye injury in 2017, and have practiced Reiki ever since. And that is today's episode Signing off.